This is Harsh Rules. I'm Ben Harsh, and today we're going to learn to play Advanced Squad Leader Starter Kit number 3. Advanced Squad Leader Starter Kit number 3 was designed by Ken Dunn and released in 2005 by Multiman Publishing. This game supports 2 players, and each scenario takes about 2 hours to play. Before we begin this episode, I'd like to recognize the Harsh Rules Patreon supporters that help make content like this possible. If you'd like to support the channel, head over to patreon.com/harshrules to learn more. And once again, thank you for your support. Welcome back to the Harsh Rules breakdown for Advanced Squad Leader Starter Kit number 3. In this episode, we're going to cover several more AFV combat rules. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. Along with the main armament, an armored fighting vehicle may also be equipped with several machine guns. An AFV's machine gun armament is shown in the lower right-hand corner of the counter. Typically, an armored fighting vehicle's machine guns are displayed as a row of numbers divided by slashes. The first number is the firepower for a bow-mounted machine gun. Keep in mind, this weapon is fixed to the vehicle-covered arc. Bow-mounted machine guns have a range of 8 hexes. If the AFV has a number in the middle of this sequence, this is the firepower for a coaxial machine gun. The coaxial machine gun is fixed to the turret-covered arc, so it can only fire where the turret is pointing. Also note that a coaxial machine gun has a range of 12 hexes. If the AFV has a third number in the sequence, this is for an anti-aircraft machine gun. Anti-aircraft machine guns can fire in any direction, however the crew must be exposed to access the weapon. An anti-aircraft machine gun has a range of 8 hexes. Some armored fighting vehicles have superscript above their coaxial machine gun. This is a rear machine gun which uses the turret's rear-facing hexes as its covered arc. The range of a rear machine gun is 8 hexes. Now, each of these machine guns, as well as the vehicle's main armament, are subject to malfunction, utilizing a similar process as guns and support weapons. Unless otherwise stated, the default breakdown number is an original dice result of 12. Players will use the markers shown on the screen to keep track of each weapon's malfunction status or disablement. Now, let's cover some key rules regarding the use of AFV weapons. If an AFV does not fire its machine guns in the same fire phase as its main armament, this counts the movement phase and the defensive fire phase as one, it forfeits their use in other phases with the exception of the close combat phase. In its movement phase, a vehicle may fire its weapons only from the same hex unless the main armament retains rate of fire. The firepower of a vehicle's various machine guns may be added together to make one attack, assuming the target lies within the covered arc for all of the machine guns that wish to fire. Or the machine guns may make separate attacks against different targets. Next, let's take a look at an example and see how this all works. It's the German prep fire phase, and the Panzer 6B, aka the King Tiger, is attacking 2 Russian squads. The King Tiger has just fired its main armament at the 458 squad in Hex N9. Unfortunately, the shot missed, but an acquired target marker has been placed to hopefully benefit a future attack with the main armament. Since the main armament has been fired in the prep fire phase, the German player must fire the King Tiger's machine guns or forfeit their use for the rest of the turn, with the exception of an encounter in close combat. First, we need to set up a fire attack. Walking through the steps, our declared firer is the King Tiger, and it fires its 3 firepower bow machine gun, aka its BMG, and its 2 firepower anti-aircraft machine gun, its AAMG, at the 447 squad in Hex 07. Remember, these 2 machine guns are firing at the same target, so they must form a fire group to do so. They cannot fire separately at the same target and get 2 dice rolls. The target is within the vehicle covered arc and eligible to be fired upon by the bow-mounted machine gun. The anti-aircraft machine gun can fire in any direction as long as the turret is crew exposed. Now, if the German player wanted the coaxial machine gun, which is tied to the turret covered arc, to join this fire group, he would need to traverse the turret and suffer a DRM. The DRM would be determined by case 8 on the to-hit dice roll modifier table. However, keep in mind, by traversing the turret, he would also lose the acquired target counter for changing the covered arc. Therefore, he decides not to do this, and conduct his first fire attack without the coaxial machine gun. Finishing up his preparation, he verifies the range to the target. The target is 3 hexes away, which is well within both machine guns' normal range of 8 hexes. There is no hindrance or terrain effect modifiers in play. Presumably, the grain in hex 07 is not in season. Now that we've gathered this key information, let's resolve this fire attack on the infantry fire table. First, we establish the firepower column with a firepower of 5 is the 4 firepower column. Next, the German player rolls the dice. There are no modifiers to apply. The white die result is a 5, and the red die result is a 4, for a final result of 9, which does not have a result on the infantry fire table. Therefore, a miss. We're not done yet though, as we still have the coaxial machine gun that we can fire. Next, the King Tiger fires its coaxial machine gun at the 458 squad in hex N9. This target is within the King Tiger's turret-covered arc and within its line of sight. The target is 2 hexes away and well within the coaxial machine gun's 12 hex normal range. The target is inside a wooden building, and we will add a +2 DRM to the fire attack. Next, we take this information and resolve it on the infantry fire table. First, we establish the firepower column. With a firepower of 5, the coaxial machine gun is on the 4 firepower column. Then we roll the dice and apply our DRM. The red die result is a 6, and the white die result is a 5. Adding a +2 DRM gives us a final result of 13. A terrible miss. Finally, now that the King Tiger has fired its main armament at all machine guns, we tag it with a prep fire marker. One of the neat advantages to armored fighting vehicles with a full machine gun complement is that it gives you a lot of options for mixing and matching your attacks. For example, should the anti-aircraft machine gun have targeted the 447 squad in hex 07, or helped out the coaxial machine gun by targeting the 458 squad in hex N9. With 2 additional firepower added to the coaxial machine gun's 5 firepower, this fire group would have been able to attack on the 6 firepower column. However, this would drop the bow-mounted machine gun's attack down to the 2 firepower column for its target. The example's attacks were both balanced at 5 firepower, and thus used the 4 firepower column. But it's up to the player to decide what's most important for their strategy. In this section, we're going to discuss the motion status attempt. This is a special defensive maneuver that can be conducted during an opponent's movement phase that allows an AFV suddenly threatened by an enemy ground unit to change its vehicle covered arc or turret covered arc to face them. An AFV may only make this attempt once per enemy movement phase, and they cannot make this attempt if they've been marked with a first, final, or intensive fire counter. To be eligible for the maneuver, the enemy unit cannot be within the AFV's line of sight at the beginning of that player turn. In the example on the screen, it's the Russian player's movement phase, and a Russian tank is conducting movement behind a wooden building and not in the line of sight of the German King Tiger tank. However, once the Russian tank enters the German King Tiger's line of sight, it is eligible to make a motion status attempt. and basically turn either the vehicle or the turret to face the enemy. The motion status attempt itself is a single die roll versus the enemy movement point spent to enter the hex. In this example, the Russian tank spends one movement point to enter hex M6 and another movement point to change its vehicle-covered arc to the hex spine between N6 and M7, basically to bring the King Tiger's rear within its sights. Therefore, if the King Tiger makes a motion status attempt, the German player would need to roll a 2 or less on a single die. Anything above that is a failed attempt, which doesn't have a penalty, it just means they can't change their covered arc. If the motion status attempt is successful, and it hasn't been tagged beforehand, the vehicle is then tagged with a motion counter, because it is in motion. A couple final notes on this process. Be aware that a successful motion status attempt in a woods or building hex will require the AFV to make a bog check. Also, mechanical reliability still applies, and if the vehicle stalls, the attempt has failed. A vehicle already in motion may also attempt to change its vehicle covered arc or turret covered arc. Please note motion status attempts are against enemy ground units, so this also applies to infantry using movement factors. The process is the same whether it's movement points or movement factors that you're rolling against. Now, let's talk about bounding fire. Bounding fire takes two forms. The first opportunity for bounding fire is during the movement phase. A big difference from infantry is that a vehicle may move and fire in the movement phase, including versus units in the AFV's own hex. This is termed bounding first fire. When bounding first fire is conducted, place a bounding fire counter on the firing vehicle to keep track of it. There are various fire-based to hit DRMs applied to bounding first fire, such as Case 14, which is based on the amount of movement points the vehicle has expended with a line of sight to the target. Keep in mind though, Case 8 covered arc change die roll modifiers never apply to a bounding first firing unit. When reviewing Case 14, remember the basics of movement and speed. The less movement points spent, the faster the vehicle's going, and the harder it is to hit a target. This may be further impacted whether the main armament is turreted or non-turreted. For example, bounding first fire, spending less than 2 movement points in the line of sight of a target with a turret is a +6 modifier, non-turreted is a +7. To mitigate this, a vehicle may expend delay movement points while stopped to increase the amount of movement points spent in the line of sight of a target in order to reduce the DRMs, but keep in mind, the player must announce these delay movement points individually and suffer any defensive fire. Also note that a vehicle may move again in the movement phase after firing, provided it has sufficient movement points. Also, a vehicle that retained its rate of fire may conduct bounding first fire again after expending another movement point, but all other weapons, such as machine guns, must be fired in the same hex as the original main armament shot. Machine guns or any infantry fire equivalency attacks have their firepower halved in the movement phase and quartered if non-stopped. In ASL terminology, non-stopped means during the movement phase a vehicle that has not expended a stop movement point since its last movement phase. So essentially, if the vehicle is in motion at the beginning of the movement phase, and the player decides to conduct bounding first fire, the firepower of the attack will be quartered. For the firepower to only be halved, the vehicle must be stopped first. Be aware this restriction does not apply to vehicular flamethrowers, which are not halved for firing the movement phase, but are halved if non-stopped. Now, a vehicle may fire again in the advancing fire phase if it fires only its main armament in the movement phase and retains its rate of fire. Vehicles that moved but did not fire may then conduct bounding fire in the advancing fire phase. Next, we're going to look at an example for bounding fire. In doing so, we're going to flash back to the last episode's example with the duel between the Russian KV-1 M41 and the Panzer IIIN. As you may recall, our previous example had the Panzer IIIN in the movement phase crossing the map and then being attacked when it moved into the Russian KV-1 M41 site entering G5. It is now the advancing fire phase, and the Panzer IIIN is going to fire back using bounding fire. Now technically, the Panzer IIIN could have fired back during the movement phase using bounding first fire, but using bounding fire in the advancing fire phase allows it to place an acquired target marker, which can add a valuable modifier for future attacks. Therefore, to set up this bounding fire attack, we're going to walk through the to-hit procedure. In step 1, declare the target. The target this time is the Russian KV-1 M41. The target type will be the vehicle target type, and the range to that target is 3 hexes away. Now, for this attack, the German player decides to do something a little different. So the German player declares that he will use high explosive anti-tank special ammunition. Referencing the back of the counter, we can see that the heat ammunition has a depletion number of 9. Which basically means the original hit dice must be at or lower than this to have the ammunition and take the shot. After that, we need to find the to-hit number. Referencing the to-hit chart, this is a German tank with a 75mm short barrel, that's what the asterisk means. And we're at a range of 1 to 6 hexes, so our to-hit number is 10, and of course the critical hit number is 2. This takes us to determining our fire-based to-hit DRMs. There are 2. The first is case 13 for being buttoned up for a +1 DRM, and case 14 for bounding fire. In case 14, we're going to select the first entry because we're in the advancing fire phase, and this tank is equipped with a fast traverse turret, which is abbreviated as T. Therefore, it's a +4 DRM. And for both cases, we have a total fire-based DRM of +5. Next, for the target-based DRMs, we have case 18, hindrance, and that's for the smoke and hex F4, so that adds a +2 DRM. And then case 22 for the gun or vehicle target size. The Russian KV-1 M41 is a large target, indicated by the red text on its top armor factor. To be clear, that's the front armor factor text that is red. This provides a -1 DRM. Therefore, our total for this target DRM section is a +1. Next, the German player rolls the dice. The white die result is 2, and the red die result is 3, which gives us an original die result of 5 before the DRMs. 5 is well below our depletion number of 9, so we can take this shot, and we can try for that heat ammo again. However, when we add the DRM of +6, we get an 11, which is 1 above the to-hit number, which equals a miss. But at least a target acquired marker is placed on the Russian tank to help the German player with their next attack. And now that we've finished this brief bounding fire example, this is a good place to stop for this episode. In the next episode of this series, we're going to take a look at man versus machine. In other words, rules centered around infantry versus AFVs. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel, click the bell icon for notifications so you'll know when the next episode becomes available. If you found this video helpful, please give me a like and share with your friends. To be the first notified when the next episode of Harsh Rules becomes available, please hit the bell icon for notifications. And as always, this has been Harsh for Harsh Rules. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.